Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hide to Speak. I am Chris Miller, the CMO for vp.net. Shane and Susie are unfortunately not able to be here today because they're dealing with some pretty nasty weather and a power outage in Hawaii. So we're all praying that they get everything back together again and they'll be here with us on the next one. So again, I'm Chris, and I'm excited to be here. And Nathan, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Nathan, a creative media specialist with vp.net, and super happy to be here today. And obviously, good vibes sending out to Shane and Susie, hoping everything goes well there. And excited to be with Stefan Perez here today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yep, and we have an amazing guest today. Is it Stephen or Stefan? Just want to make sure we get that right. Stefan. Okay. We have Stefan Perez here. He's the Program and Communications Director for Restore the Fourth, a pretty amazing organization. So, Stefan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So I just want to take a minute here to show some love to our company, vp.net, who's making all this possible. So we just got a quick little video to watch.
vp.net, the only VPN that can't spy on you. Your browsing data says more about you than you think. From marketing companies to hackers, everyone wants it because it's worth everything. And they'll stop at nothing to spy on you. Your searches and the sites you visit, that's enough to paint a picture. Most VPNs claim to protect your privacy, but here's the problem. You can't actually verify what they're doing behind the scenes. That's where vp.net is different. We're the only VPN built with Intel's SGX technology, the same trusted security used in banking, healthcare, and even the automotive industry. Here's the key. vp.net runs inside a secure black box, a protected environment so locked down that even we can't see inside it. That means no one, not even vp.net itself, can spy on your activity when you connect. You can verify in real time that your VPN is doing exactly what it promises, protecting you and nothing else. vp.net means no hidden tracking, no broken promises, just real provable privacy. vp.net, the only VPN you don't have to trust because you can verify.
Excellent. And again, thank you to vp.net for making all this possible. So today we have a super, super important conversation to have. And we're just going to start off with getting to know our guest a little better. So, Stefan, you spent years researching how the government suppresses societal movements. At what point did you decide to stop studying the problem and start fighting it with Restore the Fourth?
Yeah, I got my start in college, which is at this point quite a few years ago. And I was an activist and organizer in Broome County, New York, where Binghamton University is. And my focus then was more on police surveillance and incarceration broadly. And I was going to Broome County Jail pretty frequently to interview inmates there. And something that really stuck with me like time and time again was this sentiment from those who were incarcerated where they said, I'm constantly watched. I can't do anything that a human would do comfortably here. And a lot of them expressed the sentiment, that they're saying it's not that much different from outside of the jail, where there are police everywhere. There are cameras down the street from where I lived, where my family is. So this constant watchfulness, it felt to them like this sort of inescapable net. It was almost inevitable that at some point they were going to be arrested and incarcerated. And I wrote a lot about this and translated it into my studies. And then after I graduated, I started working with Restore the Fourth. I've been with them for about 3.5 years. And so far in this past few years, I've been directly involved in this fight for policy and law that helps protect civil liberties and Fourth Amendment rights. And I speak with the staff from members of Congress probably 5 to 6 times a week. So I'm directly involved in that process.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Your bio says you're committed to liberation and the commons. For those of us who don't have a sociology degree, what does that actually mean for the average person's privacy?
Yeah. So the commons is a very, very old concept dating back to pre-capitalist society. And generally, the commons then referred to the open field where farmers and peasants would go and collect firewood and shear their sheep and collect various herbs and plants used in medicinal substances, right? And over time, the commons were encroached upon in the transition to capitalist society and privatized. And what activists have done with that concept is they've taken it and they've applied it to the digital realm. And so we see the commons manifest now as sort of open source information, decentralized payment systems, open source software, right? All of these things that when the internet was first coming of age, this was sort of the utopic dream of the internet. It would democratize information. It would democratize voices in the political process. And so for the average person, you think of the commons, you should think of a shared resource that there isn't one person that owns it. There's no hierarchy in place that determines the distribution of resources, in this case, information, for example. And so I think that for us to be truly liberated, to feel like we're free in a democratic society, we need to go back to this model of treasuring the commons. And when it comes to the digital world, I think the average person can see clearly now, just by being on social media, owning a smartphone, having a computer, these things are very top-down, owned by extremely wealthy tech billionaires who have an interest in censoring information, restricting information that we receive about crucial events like war and conflict. So that, I think, is the most baseline understanding of it here. And I think everyone should get involved in believing in the commons, because the more people do, the larger they grow, the stronger they are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. That was very cool. Let's see what we got. You published work on the suppression of social dissent. In your experience, does the government primarily use surveillance to catch criminals, or is it more about making people too afraid to speak up in the first place?
So in a way, it's both. It's simultaneous. This classic vision of the panopticon, right? This idea that you never really know whether or not you're being watched. And so because of that thought, you have that feeling, you adjust your behavior accordingly, because you never know when that one thing you're doing is going to be seen and then therefore maybe punished. And this is also, Orwell's in 1984, a big push of his narrative, right? In the main character, Wilson, who is in front of the television screen in his apartment, and he's trying to find that one corner in where the screen potentially can't catch him writing in a diary. But throughout the book, he's thinking to himself, I never know if my detraction from Big Brother is known by the members of the party who would kill him or put him in a camp, right? And so in our modern day experience now, what we're seeing is, as surveillance technology grows to be everywhere, it's ubiquitous, whether that's cameras or license plate readers or the collection of data from your phone, you constantly have this feeling of some higher power knows what I'm doing, they know what I'm thinking, and that in turn is very, very, very powerful for the government and other institutions with power. It's coercive. It adjusts people's behavior. But in the course of everyday life, it's largely impossible to know exactly what's going to be the thing that gets you in trouble, because that definition is always shifting. We see it today where, for example, the current administration in the United States is looking to criminalize certain speech acts and First Amendment protected activities. And now there's this real risk. For example, if you go to a protest, that is a First Amendment protected civil liberty. You have the right to assemble and protest and advocate for what you think in a nonviolent manner. But even then, that is criminalized. So it's this double-edged blade of you're being watched, and at any point in time, that behavior that can be scrutinized, criminalized, and thus you can be arrested, you can be sent to prison. But it's important to note that imprisonment and incarceration is not the only ways that punishment is meted out in this context. There's stories and reports of activists being debanked, being completely isolated from financial institutions, which kind of sort of underlies the threat of a central digital bank currency, for example. There's also the censorship of speech in general, whether that's on social media or news outlets. So you can be punished in a myriad of ways here that may not look just or directly like police violence or incarceration, although those are, again, looming dangerous threats for anyone.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned, the idea of not knowing what it is that will get you in trouble. And we've talked about this before, that's actually become a method of control used by the social media sites where, I've gotten message before that says your account has been limited because of a post that you made recently, but they don't tell you which post. So now you're going through your profile like, maybe it was this one, I better delete that to be safe. Maybe it was this one, I better delete that to be safe. So in reality, what they should be doing, if I was truly violating the terms of service, fair enough, I should delete that one post. But they don't tell you which one it is, so you have to go in and you wipe out half of your account trying to figure out which one it is. So they trick you into self-censoring yourself like 20 times worse than you actually should be. So, I definitely feel that.
And nobody wants to be recorded, right? And just like Stefan was saying, everybody behaves differently when you think you're being watched. And now it's not that you are just being watched, you are being recorded and placed onto a server for who knows how long that lasts. And what you could say today and what you could say in 2005 or 1975 or 1850 or whatever are all different things. So to be recorded for all of time is an even amplification of this fear factor that they're trying to imply.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot. We talk a lot about Big Brother, this looming concept of there is a higher power that's watching you. But I think something that is equally important there is this concept of little brother, right? We all, or most of us, have smartphones with camera capabilities, and it's a sort of almost psychological impulse from a lot of people to pull out the phone and start recording something that they see, recording someone that they see, and then uploading it to social media or some forum on the internet. And it's a really dangerous internalization of the methods of control that have been passed down to us historically for really hundreds of years. I mean, back to the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln had a very keen interest in monitoring telegraph systems at the time to see what people were saying, right? So this is a constant and consistent strain through the history of the United States that I don't think people really grasp how enduring it's been.
Absolutely. I feel like things have really accelerated too in recent years, and it's getting to the point where I think a lot of people are starting to feel hopeless about the situation, and it's making people just like give up. When in reality, like we should do the exact opposite. Like if they push hard, we got to push harder back, and you never give up. And they're kind of hoping that everybody will get apathetic about it and just let it happen. But I know I'm for one is not going to just be quiet, but I'm pretty sure you're not either. So there's another major looming threat that we've got here, just coming up with a pretty short deadline. Section 702 is supposed to be for tracking foreign terrorists. So how exactly does it end up being used to look through regular Americans' emails and texts?
Yeah. So FISA Section 702 surveillance, FISA stands for the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And the surveillance conducted under this, so we call it a surveillance authority. We have to go back to the days of George Bush after 9/11. And what was happening was under wraps, secretly, George Bush was conducting foreign intelligence surveillance as well as domestic surveillance of cell phone metadata and web traffic in bulk under this. He just called it the President's Surveillance Program. In official records, it was called Stellar Wind. And so what happens is after a while of this surveillance being conducted, in 2005, the New York Times publishes this big expose where they reveal this program under Bush. And so the response to that from Congress was, all right, let's just legalize it and continue what's going on, rather than do the right thing, which would be to stop it completely and hold the president at the time accountable to some measure. But nonetheless, it was legalized in what's called Title VII of FISA. So years pass where essentially the same surveillance is being conducted under 702. And so we should look at what the surveillance looks like more deeply, I think. So what happens is the NSA has a list of foreign targets. And there's about 300,000 of them, give or take. And these targets are foreign nationals. They're people that are not US citizens, and they are outside of the borders of the United States. That's all well and good for the most part. But we live in a global world. Americans talk to foreigners all the time, whether that's for business, they have family abroad, they have friends online that live in another country. It's bound to happen. So the NSA is saying, we're only targeting these foreigners, but really they're vacuuming out these communications. And inevitably what happens is they vacuum up Americans' communications as well. And to this day, the NSA has not given a good faith estimate of the number of Americans' communications they've brought into their database. We don't know. It's actually a big point of contention as to what method to use to calculate that number in the first place. Nonetheless, there's a bunch of our communications in this NSA database, the 702 database. So then what happens is the FBI primarily, but also the CIA, will query this database. Query, think of it, fancy name for a search, but basically they'll put in to their system a selector. And a selector could be an email, a phone number, maybe a social media handle. And the goal there is to pull any communications associated with that selector. So they could put in a selector for a foreign person, and that would be legal. But inevitably, Americans' communications get pulled with that search. And so then the FBI can go and search your text messages, your emails, a phone call you made. And they can search the metadata for those communications as well. And they're doing this without a warrant that would be authorized by a judge based on probable cause. The legal standard is much, much lower. It's in law. They say that a query must reasonably be likely to return foreign intelligence information. That's a really, really low bar. I mean, foreign intelligence information that's broad. It encompasses so much stuff.
It's vague, and who gets to decide that, right?
Right, exactly.
I mean, the price of French fries in Russia is technically intelligence. You know what I mean? Like whether or not it's useful or not doesn't matter. They could literally claim that that's intelligence. You know, so basically anything that involves anything outside of the U.S. is fair game.
Yes, exactly. And so one of the primary ways that we want to fix this surveillance authority is a warrant requirement in law that says to any analyst or agent, you need to get a warrant, it has to be authorized, and you need to explain with a good and solid series of facts why this search is necessary to the foreign intelligence investigation that you are doing right now. And just to give a scope of how much this has been abused by the FBI in particular, in 2023, there were over 50,000 US person queries. A few years before that, we were looking at millions. And the numbers have declined over time. So at face value, it looks like some of the internal changes the agency has made to sort of fix this problem have worked, right? But that is it's the double speak, so to use the term from Orwell, that the intelligence agencies are infamous for, because you got to look a little closer at this. The latest reported numbers, they say there's been about 5,000 US person searches. It's a really steep decline, about 90%. But in a National Security Division report, we learned recently that they have been using what they're calling an advanced filter function to do these searches. And conveniently, that system does not log those searches. So there is no existing record of how many times or what content was put through that filter function. So
or who is doing it.
Or who's doing it, exactly. So we don't know actually the correct number of US person searches that are being done in this database. And we don't know the analyst that's doing it either. So all of these amazing internal reforms the FBI has been touting over the years about increased punishments for violating regulations and laws relating to searches and terminating analysts who don't follow the procedures, we don't really know that that's happening. And so we have to, I think unfortunately, come from a place of we cannot trust these agencies or these law enforcement officers to responsibly use this. So the legislation that needs to be passed to adequately reform this needs to have enforceable, strict guidelines that use the courts in particular to really increase compliance here, to the point that, at least this is restore the fourth stance, but I personally do really believe that the only good number of US person queries is 0. And until that's really demonstrated, that this fight for fixing the law is incredibly important.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That was a very good answer. I appreciate that. We keep hearing about the data broker loophole. Is it true the government can just buy the data on us that they would normally need a warrant to seize?
Yeah. It's a massive, massive problem. So, a warrant requirement is great, but there's nothing really stopping in the intelligence agencies or federal law enforcement from just going ahead and purchasing this data from third-party private data brokers. The data broker industry is $1 billion industry. And the intelligence agencies themselves have released transparency reports saying, yep, we acquire commercially available information, we purchase it in bulk, and we search it without a warrant. And this is information that you normally would need a warrant in the course of an investigation to acquire, right? So this is it. Basically anything you can think of in terms of information that is produced by you or about you can be purchased. Your credit reports, your financial information, employment history, things as granular as geolocation information. So where you go to work, where do you live, what kind of activities do you do outside of work in your personal life, what protests are you attending, right? Who you're associated with, social media handles. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. It's granular. So we need to, in this a FISA reform law that would reauthorize the power, we need a provision that bans the acquisition of commercially available information. And so these reforms are encompassed in a law that is called the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act. That's incredibly important to pass. And the last time it was in Congress, the House passed it and the Senate never took it up. So we're hoping that in this reauthorization, we can package it with a bigger law and it'll get passed through.
No, I hope so. I was actually going to ask you, what happens if April 20th doesn't go well, but it sounds like there's already a pretty good plan in place for that.
Well, and wasn't the whole point too, like they can just set up shell companies in foreign countries and then say, oh, this came from such and such or France or this and that. It's not about us. And that's really the loophole in the end.
Yeah. There was a media report from, I think, last year where they found that the government was doing business with data brokers who specifically collected and then repackaged information on U.S. military personnel and veterans,
Right.
particularly where they were located, including the bases where they were stationed, which is not only a major privacy Fourth Amendment violation, it's a national security threat because U.S. government agencies aren't the only people who are buying this stuff. Foreign governments also buy this information, these packaged databases. So it's actually like a real tangible danger too.
For sure. Yeah, I remember Shane actually told us a story a while back where there was some fitness app and it would like track your run route or where you went hiking. And there was some US base that was like top secret. You need top clearance to even know that it exists. It's not on any maps or anything like that. But here it was on this fitness app because all the soldiers would use it while they were running and they would run all along the outline of the base. So they had perfectly mapped the exact outline of this base that was supposed to be hidden. And like nobody thought about it. They're just like, I'm going out for my jog and keep track of it so I know if I'm getting in shape, But meanwhile, like you just told the enemies where you're located, and it's scary, like how easy this information can leak because everything seems to be tracking all kinds of data and location data. And it's weird because like most people they just hit accept when they're installing an app, and they don't even pay attention to like what they're agreeing to. But like my kids aren't, they can install an app on their phone without it going through me first. And it'll be the dumbest little thing. It'll just be like this little simple game, and it'll be like, we need microphone and we need access to your text messages, we need access to your call log, you don't need any of that. Like this is not okay. This is not a good app, And a lot of people they're just hitting accept. They don't realize you just gave everything that this app can possibly suck up. You just gave it permission, and you have no idea what's happening to it. And like, most people think, oh, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to get a targeted ad. Like, well, no, a worst case scenario, this is going to law enforcement agencies all around the world, and who knows who else, Yeah. Is there anything else about Section 702 you think we should? I know a lot of stuff we wanted to cover today, but is there anything else about Section 702 you think we should bang out here?
I think the one other thing to keep in mind is over the years, the political dynamics have shifted quite a bit, and what we're looking at right now is it's generally very bipartisan issues. There's a lot of support from the left and right because for the left, a lot of it is about currently, the unjust surveillance of, for example, Black Lives Matter protesters. That was a big scandal that happened using 702. And there's also a lot of immigrant surveillance that's happening under 702. And for the right, this is equally of importance because there's been a lot of surveillance, for example, on Catholic prayer apps and gun owners, and also a huge scandal I'm sure a lot of people know about, but Carter Page, Trump's staffer, was surveilled under Title I of FISA, which is different, but we don't need to get into the weeds of that one. Nonetheless, I think I just want to make it clear to people, like, this is a really, really popular reform, a really popular change in government policy, and to resist anything you see from an intelligence agency official or national security hawk that they're going to try to fearmonger and say this power, if this is not reauthorized, clean slate without any reforms, the quote unquote terrorists are going to get us and we're going to be in extreme danger without it. And that's that tactic of fear more broadly that is a huge thread in this policy debate that you have to reject outright, because ultimately, with a warrant requirement, with strong privacy protections in the law, the sky is not going to fall, and it'll be better for every single person in this country, regardless of political affiliation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's, I tell people we try not to get into politics as far as like left or right, because on all of these issues, over the years, it's shifted back and forth. The left is in charge, the right's in charge. And through all of them, the surveillance keeps getting worse. Our privacy, our internet rights, they're getting violated more. So, I mean, neither one of those sides is representing it, because at the same time, the people on both sides have been very clear, we don't want this. So both sides politically are not representing both sides, as far as the citizens go. So this is definitely not a left or right. You're absolutely right. This is a why isn't our government listening to us issue? Because we're being very clear here. Nobody wants this. The only people they can get to agree with it or go along with it are the people that don't care enough to really look into it, and they just fall for what you just said. Like, if we don't do this, the terrorists are going to get us. And that's as far as they look into it. And they go, okay, well, yeah, I support that. But anybody who actually is paying attention and looking into what this means, nobody wants this, except for maybe the data brokers or the government. But yeah, no, absolutely. This is definitely an issue that we can and should all come together on.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point
one
too, because like anybody that I talk to that is left or right or wherever, when you actually explain the details of what happens after all these things, I would say 99% of regular average people agree that, we don't want to have cameras recording us all the time, and we don't want to have, the government having all of this overreach controlled. And who are these people that are working in the government anyways? So whether it's left or right at the time, it seems to be the same to me. So I just wanted to make that point.
Absolutely. So, I mean, here's another big issue that, again, a lot of the citizens seem to agree on, but I don't think we're getting that representation that we're looking for. Well, most people see the ALPR, like license plate readers, as like a way to catch car thieves. That's how it's, marketed and sold. What is the dark side of having all of your movements tracked every day?
Yeah, so there are a few companies that focus on automated license plate reader technology, but the big one is Flock Safety. And so just to, I think, lay the groundwork for how this works on a daily basis, right? These cameras are positioned generally high up on sort of electrical wire posts, but also they can be hidden within parked police cars. They're all over the place. And what these cameras do is that they're meant to capture the license plate of each vehicle that passes by it. And because they're positioned along roads in a consistent and widespread basis, your car, the snapshot of where your vehicle is at a given time and location, is just one point along essentially a line that's being recorded as you move. So they're getting a really good picture of where you started and where you ended. And it's, despite what the company says, journalists and investigators have uncovered that these ALPRs also capture data including the make and model of your car, the color of your car. In addition, they have found that it will capture actual photos of you driving. So with this photo content, the access to it is sold to law enforcement agencies, where police will then search these databases without a warrant. And we've had quite a few scandals in the past few years come out that I think demonstrate the dangerous reality of this. Early this year, a woman she was traveling across state lines to receive an abortion. She was traveling from Texas north. And police in Texas used ALPR flock database information to track her, find her, and apprehend her. And what she was doing was not illegal. It was protected in the state in which she was trying to receive reproductive care. But in Texas, the politics are changing. Laws are being shifted to criminalize this kind of thing. And whether or not you agree with the procedure itself is irrelevant. What's of principle here is that no one should feel as if they are being tracked across the country in their own vehicle by a series of cameras that police can access with little to no reason. If you look at the records of police searches of flock databases, they're generally required to put a reason. Why did you search this? And the reasons are bare bone to literally none. I mean, it's things just like investigation, or in some cases, they've used racial slurs to query these databases. Other times, it would just be things like terrorism. But that essentially amounts to nothing. That's not what. If you put that in front of a judge on a warrant, they're going to laugh at you and tell you, go get a warrant and some facts to support what you're trying to do here. So flock and ALPRs more generally, highly dangerous. They should not be in any of our communities. And there's a really vibrant and active movement growing in localities across the United States that are saying, we don't want them here. Take them down. Cancel the contracts. They don't make us any safer. And that point is largely true. Research has shown that they don't really reduce crime. They do increase strain on police resources because they're also not entirely accurate. And they wind up in conjunction with gunshot detection systems. They oftentimes wind up sending police into neighborhoods for no reason, because there's actually no crime going on there. The ALPR gave some wrong information about a vehicle, or the gunshot detection system detected a firework went off and said it was a gunshot. So it's a strain on police resources. Doesn't really reduce crime. Your car isn't any safer from theft, whether they're there or not. And they are a major, major violation of your rights, your privacy, and your safety.
And, I think that's a great point you just brought up here, Stefan. I really just wanted to say, what they've done is try to shift the accountability from the public servants to the citizens. So now it's us who are supposed to be accountable for everything, but then you're not, and I'm the one paying you with my taxes. And I'm trying to figure out how any of this makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't think it does make sense. We did a flock safety live stream a while ago, and I spent hours and hours and hours researching it, because the big thing we wanted to know is is it helping? Because it sounds like something that could help. I mean, if you don't know, it does sound like something that would be useful. So I looked into it, and there were municipalities that in the first 3 years of using it, not only was there no reduction in crime, like there was one that specifically they got it because there was home break-ins, and that was the main thing. Burglary was what they were really focusing on, and all crime stayed the same except for burglary, which went up by 5%. And they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. Everybody's privacy was violated, and at the end of the day, like it made things worse. Like it didn't actually solve the problem, And we looked at another one, just like the number of unsolved murders in the country, and ever since Flock came to be, like it's just on a climb. It's going straight up. Like it's just, you would think that would be going down. You know what I mean? If it was highly effective, you would be solving those murders. I don't believe that the world is now suddenly twice as violent as it was 5 years ago. I don't really think there's twice as many people murdering each other out there. But for some reason, only half as many of them are getting arrested. Because when we're at the same time, I mean, some of the technology they're rolling out now, they have these mobile Flock mega stations that have the ALPR in them. They have facial recognition AI cameras in them. They even have drones that leave the station and fly around over a protest or whatever, filming everybody and reporting back to the home station. And they have solar panels too, and like a generator built in. So it's like this all-in-one panopticon. You could go drop down in the middle of a protest and capture all the information you possibly can on everybody there. And no one agreed to that. Nobody said okay to that, And like we had them on the channel, they were like, I don't see what the big deal is. This is just a still photograph. It's not even a video, which was disingenuous for a couple of reasons. One, I found on their website that a lot of their newer models that just take the still shots, you can call them up and say, hey, video would be super helpful on here. And they can give you video, which means that it's always capturing the video. So for start, right out of the gate, they're lying. Secondly, they have a whole series of cameras, which are the ones that were exposed to be looking at playgrounds and not even have password protection on them. So that's not true. But, when you get to the point, you have a drone that, like, if looking where the camera's pointed isn't good enough, they can literally fly anywhere they want and look at stuff. You know what I mean? And this is just, it's such a escalation in surveillance that, like, is mind blowing, and to think that it's, that excuse that it's just a still photo. Like, even if we go back to the ALPR and just the still photo, it's a still photo that's also registering the time of day, a GPS location, and it's connected to a network of every other still photo that has your vehicle and the time and the GPS location, And it's funny, we said on that stream, I said, at worst case scenario, this could be used to assassinate a president. And he laughed at me. And 2 weeks later, we find out that Israel hacked Iran's traffic cameras and used it to kill their supreme leader. So, yeah, no, this could be used to assassinate a world leader. You know what I mean? Like, that's how dangerous this is. And even if I actually believe that every government and every police station, every single person that uses this does things by the book and they work in all the best checks and balances and rules they possibly can, that doesn't change the fact that any criminal out there with hacking ability has the ability to get into one of these and do things like assassinate a world leader. So, you know what I mean? When we agree and sit back and let them install a surveillance network on the whole world, like, it's only going to lead to really dangerous stuff. So, I'm definitely with you on that.
Yeah. So just before we move past this, I wanted to bring up some statistics here. Currently, the murder clearance rate in the United States is 57%. 57% of murders are solved. 1960, it was 95%.
Your audio's cutting out.
When I bring up that statistic to people, it's kind of shocking.
Okay, I'm sorry, you cut out for a second. If you go back, I heard 57%. Can you go back to that point?
Yeah, so the murder clearance rate in the United States is 57%, which means that 57% of murders are charged and proven every year. In 1960, it was 95%.
Wow.
To that point, there's really something to be said here about perhaps more information is not always better. Because what happens is you get this sort of glut of information that creates a bunch of white noise. And so this is particularly noted in when we talk about fusion centers, which takes all of these police surveillance technologies and incorporates them into one centralized system for agents and analysts to go through and search for terrorist plots or whatever, whatever the big boogeyman of the day is. And so there've been people who have sort of like independent journalists, sociologists, investigators who have gone in to these fusion centers to see what they're about. They find one that essentially not a single terrorist plot has been foiled with all of this information. There's no actual record of not a single one stopped. The second thing is that analysts often talk about, we don't know where to start and finish in this massive haystack of information, where the tiny little gem that they're searching for is in a bunch of white noise. So I think it's really important narratively when we're talking about this and trying to get people to really to activate people on surveillance and reform and privacy advocacy is that what they're telling you, that they need as much information as possible, is not true. And this murder clearance rate is a proof point to say it's not helping. And if anything, it's making you less safe. It's putting you in danger.
Absolutely. That's a good point. I mean, honestly, that I knew the situation was bad, but that difference
and
in
that's the thing. When I bring up that number with my friends or family members, they're all like, they're absolutely shocked. They think the number is going to be like 90% or something, this and that. And that's not even just a totally recent thing. Ever since the 90s, the number has been in the 60s and 50s, and in all of the 2000s, really good. I think in 2020, it was actually 50%.
That's crazy. It doesn't make me feel safe. Let's see. What else? How about geofence warrants? You must be a big fan of geofence warrants, right?
Oh, I think that they are abominable. But yeah, geofence warrants. That's a good one. That's a good thing to talk about. So what they are, we'll start there. A law enforcement officer or agency will send a request to any kind of a electronic communication service provider, internet service provider. Let's use Google because they collect location information. And location information is the crux of this. And so they'll say, we want a record of every single pinged mobile device in a given radius at a given time on this day. And so these warrants will, I think, they're essentially the equivalent of a general warrant, the thing that American revolutionaries fought against when the British colonials were doing it. And it amounts to surveilling a bunch of people who have done nothing to justify suspicion of a crime. They just happened to be around a bank at the time of a bank robbery, right? And so nonetheless, their location information is getting combed through by police. They're being treated as a suspect in a crime. And that is the antithesis of what a warrant is meant to do. It's meant to individualize, it's meant to be particular, and it's meant to be backed by a solid basis of facts that show that this investigation is justified and will catch the person that we suspect of doing this crime. So geofence warrants are, unfortunately, the courts are heavily split on this. Some say they amount to a general warrant, they shouldn't be allowed. Other judges will justify them and say, that's fine, it comports with the Fourth Amendment enough where they can use them, albeit maybe in a limited way. But in my view, they should not be allowed, and they're really quite egregious in the panoply of surveillance tactics that are used.
Absolutely, yeah. I really hate that concept. did a whole episode on them once, and we looked into some of the different cases, and like it's just horrifying where people are, getting everything about them, looked at and surveilled because, like I said, they're guilty of existence in a certain location. Like, guilt by proximity is not a thing. Like, you're allowed to
You're
exist
just
somewhere.
driving by, and all of a sudden you're going to get arrested. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it it really boggles my mind that the courts are so divided on this. Like, I honestly, like most issues, I'm able to kind of see both sides of it, and while I don't agree with one side, I can understand how they get there. I have trouble understanding how the court, half the courts are getting to this concept that this should be okay, and I think it's one of those like willful ignorance. They're like, we know this isn't okay, but we really want the benefit of it, so we're just going to go for it anyway, and that's just not okay. You know what I mean? It's a scary thought. Like, somebody brought up another example, which is true with both situations like this, and also true with situations like Flock, where you have a first responder, you have an EMT, for example, who constantly goes into bad neighborhoods rescuing drug addicts that are overdosing. Well, their digital footprint now looks like they're a crackhead or something. You know what I mean? And flock cameras see them going in and out of this neighborhood constantly. Their location data, if there's a geofence warrant because somebody got shot over there, well, he's getting scooped up every single time. You know what I mean? And this is one of the nicest people out there. He's just trying to go help people and save people, but because of the way they're collecting digital information, so just randomly, that someone in that situation is absolutely going to pop up and probably end up being investigated under multiple cases just because they're an EMT. You know what I mean? And there's so many other examples like that. It's really a wild situation that's allowed.
They look at it like it's just data, right? They look at it like it's data, and it's not like we're a human. It's just like, oh, this thing was here at this point, and this thing happened nearby, so all of a sudden you might be implicated. When the furthest most point of the truth, or that might be the furthest most point of the truth. So I'm not with all of the location stuff and the geofencing, and I think it's evil in the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, yeah, and like it's again, like you said, the concept of too much information. I was reading the other day this was a Flock case, but there was one case that the location, the area, the search area they put in was so wide, it encompassed 25 million vehicles. I'm like, this if you need a search so wide that you're pulling in 25 million vehicles, you do not have enough information to make a search. Like, you need to go back and get some actual information, because in that case, 24,999,999 people that are innocent are getting roped into this thing just so you can catch that one single person that did it. Like, that's insane. And think of the resources involved for them to go through 25 million cars to try to figure out what's the right one here. You know what I mean? That's insane.
With a what is it, 14% error rate too?
Yeah, exactly. Or no, it was 93% accuracy rate, but that works out to 1 in 14 cars they might get it wrong. So every 14 car that drives by any one of the 100,000 plus Flock cameras might get tagged as like a terrorist or a murderer for no reason. You know what I mean? And we see those horror stories.
Yeah.
Let's see what we got. We've seen recent headlines about smart doorbells and private security cameras being networked directly into police departments. Are we accidentally building a 24/7 surveillance state ourselves just by trying to protect our front porches?
Yes. And unfortunately, it's driven by a fear of your neighbor, a fear of a sort of spectral, omnipresent threat that it morphs into whatever is convenient for police or intelligence agencies. And so, concretely, you look at something like Amazon's doorbell Ring camera thing, and they are in the process of signing contracts with law enforcement agencies where they've done it before, where those Ring doorbells would upload and be shared directly with law enforcement agencies. Nowadays, so what happened was Amazon then canceled that let's say cooperation agreement, but now they're bringing it back with a new veneer of trust us, it's okay. And the way this is working is what police now can do is on the Neighbors app, where people can talk with their neighbors in their community about stuff they saw, or they can share footage from their Ring doorbell camera directly to this platform for others to see. Police can directly request that footage from you via the Neighbors app. And there's a few things that I have a problem with here. Number one, put yourself in that situation. You're on the Neighbors app and you get a message from your local police department saying, we would like this footage from your doorbell camera from this day to this day. The coercive power of the police is more likely than not going to compel you to share that. Even if you have hesitancy, even if you feel like, I don't know if I want to do that. How many people feel comfortable, even if it's within your rights, to say no to a law enforcement officer? That's a really fundamental Fourth Amendment issue when we talk about coercion, being compelled, and not really necessarily having the complete freedom of choice to protect your privacy and the privacy of your neighbors when bumping up against the entrance of law enforcement officers. So we're building, again, the like I referenced earlier, there's a sort of little brother surveillance network that is directly holding hands with Big Brother. And I really do understand this feeling of wanting to have that on your front porch because you don't want your packages stolen, or God forbid emergency happens. You want to have some kind of record so that you can get the help you need, so that you can see who has maybe caused you harm and seek justice for that harm. Right? This is not a crazy thing to want, and I don't blame people for that. But as a first step, to protect not just your own privacy, but the privacy of your community and the people around you, I think it's important to resist sharing that with law enforcement officers unless you think it is absolutely necessary. But secondly, consider storing that footage locally on your own device. There is a way to change that through the settings of the doorbell camera. Amazon may have paywalled it. That needs to be confirmed. But we want to restrict as much as possible the access to this highly sensitive video data. Because it's ultimately, it all goes back to how much do you want to be watched where you live. Your in Fourth Amendment parlance, your castle, the most private place in the country, is your home. It's the most legally protected place. How much of that do you really want to give up?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's scary. Sometimes I drive down the road and I just look over and I'll see every single house, one after another, ring doorbells, and they'll look to the other side and every single house ring doorbells. And I'm like, you cannot exist anywhere in this entire neighborhood without being on like 10 different angles of video. You know what I mean? And it's horrifying. Like for work, I was forced to move to a neighborhood like that. And I love being outside. I prefer to be outside. Even if I'm on the computer, I'd rather take my laptop and go sit outside on a nice day than inside, And when I lived in this place, and this was in California too, so there was beautiful weather all the time. I never, ever, ever left the apartment because, like, I don't want to be on video. Like, it's too creepy knowing, even just I'm sitting there working, and now anything on my screen, somebody might be videotaping what's on my screen. Now, like, I don't feel comfortable even doing my job outside, and it's just such a horrible feeling to know that, to not know. That's what's even worse, is that you don't know who is watching, you know what I mean? And that's just such a creepy feeling.
Well, and that's the whole point, right? Like, who gave consent to this? Nobody voted on this.
Really?
Like, nobody. It's not like we had a huge upwell of people being like, excuse me, but wanting to be recorded on camera everywhere they go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we actually have some awesome questions here. So maybe we'll do a few of these, and then we'll go to an intermission, and then come back. We have a really important topic when we get back is some privacy and safety for activists, which is a very important topic always, but it seems to be getting even more important nowadays. So definitely stick around for that. Let's see. The first question here is from a good friend of ours, Christopher Celone. How could we lobby a law to make public or private data sale a regulation?
That's a really good question. So, number one, I think the best way to do it is to join an organization like Restore the Fourth, because we have the model that can directly involve you in the process of lobbying for protective laws. But more broadly, there's a few things you're going to want to do. Number one, you're going to want to say you want to get a privacy law passed in your city. The number one thing you need to look at is your city government's website to see if there are any laws in the legislative record that are currently being debated or discussed that deal with privacy regulation. A lot of the time what happens is a bill gets introduced and then it goes to committee where they're going to discuss it, they're going to amend it, and then ultimately they're going to vote to say, yes, this is going to go to the floor for a vote, or no, we're going to push it back for further markup and revision. So number one is to see what laws potentially could be are introduced and can be advocated for. The second step would be to look at who your representative is, whether that's federal government or state government or local government. And there will always be contact information that you can find that will have their office phone number and their office email for their staff. And I recommend calling first and asking for a meeting with a relevant staffer to discuss as a constituent your interest in getting data privacy legislation passed. They take constituent concern very seriously, or at least they should. And so that is a catalyst for that office to support that kind of law. Third, if you want to expand your lobbying, you can reach out to representatives that may not represent you directly, but may support this legislation. On the federal level, if you are curious about whether or not a representative is pro-privacy or anti-privacy, I highly recommend a resource that Restore the Fourth operates. It's called decidethefuture.com. It is our political scorecard, and it will tell you whether a lawmaker is pro-privacy or anti-privacy based on their voting record. And say you have there's a bill you're really interested in seeing passed. It would be helpful for you to go and get the contact information of all those pro-privacy legislators and send out an email to them saying, hey, I am a privacy conscious American. This bill would really help solve these problems that I care about and that I think deeply affect people in this country. And I would like you to introduce it or co-sponsor it or support it and get it moving through the legislative process. And many staffers are happy to work with you. They're happy to meet with you and directly involve you in that process from start to finish of lawmaking. But like I said previously, I highly encourage you to get involved with Restore the Fourth as a volunteer, as a member of our organization, because we will gladly and graciously support any pro-privacy legislative effort that you want to push forward. We have the tools and the resources to bring that effort to scale. So if you have any questions about that stuff and how to get involved, we could talk about it at the end. My contact information hopefully should be supplied somewhere in the live stream or in the description on YouTube, and we can talk further.
Excellent. Thank you. That was great. Let's see. We got another one here. Can you describe one or two items that normal citizens can do that will help shape FISA Section 702 before the approaching deadline?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would do is, in a follow-up, we have a legislative campaign that is really easy to use, and it will send a letter directly to your congressional representative and your senator. And in that letter, it'll say, I'm an average citizen. I really care about this. I care about my privacy. I care about my Fourth Amendment civil liberties. I want you to support reforming this bill or reforming this law, which it'll go directly to their staffers' inboxes, and it will have eyes directly on what you're saying. So they're seeing this, they're taking note of it. Secondly, we have a isolated working group in the Restore the Fourth organization where we organize calls to Congress members, and we try to get meetings set up. As an ordinary, normal, everyday citizen, you have every right to be in those meetings with your congressperson and their staff. And we can help you get into those meetings. But if you want to do it on your own, it's pretty simple. Call a staffer. Usually their scheduler will pick up, and you can say something along the lines of, I'm so-and-so, I'm from this place, I'm really concerned about the reauthorization of this surveillance law that has a deadline of April 20th. I believe in these reforms. You can say there should be a warrant, and we got to close the data broker loophole. I would really like to discuss this as a constituent with a staff member from your office who is in charge of this portfolio of issues, what you would say. When are you free to do so? What is your calendar looking like, right? And you can get yourself directly in those meetings to express your concerns and to push for this reform. It takes about 30 minutes, the meetings usually, and the calls, 5-10 minutes. And again, as another follow-up, I can send over afterwards. I've written a script for ordinary people to call that you can follow near verbatim to help you with that process, so that it's as little resistance as possible, but you are making a really big impact on this process.
Very cool. Thank you. That's amazing information. It's one thing I keep hearing from people. Like, most people have this idea that a single citizen can't really make anything happen in our government, and that it's like an unapproachable thing. And if you're not a billionaire or, a Kennedy or something, that no one's going to listen to you. And then I talk to people who have gotten into things, and they're like, I was surprised at how easy it was to get in there and to say what I had to say. And I keep hearing that from people. It's just, you just have to take those first steps and try to get involved. And everybody that does that says to me, it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. And Jonathan is a great example. He in Bend, Oregon, he went and tried to get flock cameras removed, and he's like, as soon as I talked to the politicians, they're basically like, wow, we had no idea it was like this. We just didn't know. They were like, hey, these will make us safer. We're like, well, that sounds great. Let's be safer. So we all vote yes. But once they realized it's not, they were just like, well, no, we don't want that. And that was the end of it. And he got flock banned out of Bend, Oregon. And It was just, that's what it takes. Just somebody has to take those steps and get out there and inform the politicians. Because you got to think, how many pieces of paper go across their desk on a daily basis? And as sad as this is, a lot of the things that are turning into law are not being read by the people who are turning them into law. That's a sad reality that this happens a lot of times. And they read the bullet points like, what does this thing do? Oh, it catches criminals, makes us safer. Yeah, sounds great. They're not going to read the 300 pages down where it's like, oh, this is spying on people and this and this. You know what I mean? So sometimes we just have to take responsibility to make sure that they know what is really going on and that how we feel about that. And using the information, like you just said, like, it's surprising how much a single person can get done if they really, really put their mind to it.
Yep. They work for you. So,
absolutely.
That's how you should act, and that's how you should think about this kind of thing. And I am technically, like I say, I am a lobbyist, but I'm the opposite of the lobbyists you generally think of. I'm pushing for the laws that are going to protect your rights. And just like the most of these politicians, as you say, they're probably not going to read most of these bills. They're relying on lobbyists to tell them what the bill is about so that they vote for it. And the mega tech companies have basically an army of lobbyists at their side to do that. So we need to do the same as a counterbalance. And you have just as much of a right and just as much access as an ordinary citizen to be involved in that as much as you can. And I always encourage civic participation because it does move things forward in the right direction.
Absolutely. Let's see if we got another one here. What can one do to fight this if they are unjustly and unconstitutionally targeted?
This is a really, really important question. So what the current structure of surveillance law looks like and how it's written, there is very little in the way of redress for these problems legally, but there are some. So generally, if you believe that you have been victim to unwarranted, unconstitutional surveillance, you do have the right under law, it's Section 1983, to file a civil suit for damages for constitutional violations under the Fourth Amendment. Now, I recognize that filing a lawsuit is expensive, it's time-consuming, and unfortunately, the scale is tipped in favor of law enforcement, who, unless the violation is particularly egregious, will probably be the case will probably be dismissed because the police acted in quote-unquote good faith, which is a very well-established legal doctrine that essentially acts as an exception to proper police conduct. However, that is one avenue. The second way to go about this is that you need the government to disclose this surveillance. They are very, very hesitant to do this. However, one weapon in your arsenal is a Freedom of Information Act. Any citizen can file these. You may face a lot of, let's say, resistance to these requests, but ultimately, sometimes the most important step is to just get the confirmation that you were targeted under a specific surveillance authority or power. And a Freedom of Information Act can do that. For filing, it's called a FOIA. I recommend consulting other nonprofit organizations like the ACLU or the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which can give you a lot of guidance and a sort of step-by-step on how to do that. But as much as I hate that this is the way it is, the institutional power is really stacked up against getting proper redress for these kinds of violations of your constitutional rights. But it's not possible. I hope that's helpful. I know it's not the most optimistic way to look at it, but there are some ways at least.
Chris, you're muted.
That's a bit of a problem. Thank you so much for that. No, that was absolutely helpful. So that's the end of the Q&A section for right now. But if anybody has more questions for Stefan or for us, you can keep asking throughout the stream. We're going to do another Q&A section near the end. For right now, we're actually going to take a little bit of an intermission so everybody can get some water or take care of whatever they have to do. And then we'll be back in a few minutes for a really important topic. We're going to talk about privacy and safety for activists and protesters. So definitely stay tuned, and we'll see you back here in about 3 minutes.
T-minus 3 minutes. T-minus 3 minutes.
showing ads for the things that you don't really need. They want all the data, they want your ID, but I've got some news that just won't work for me. So I encrypt the connection and cover my tracks. We get to the truth and we stick to the facts. We build a safe place where the speech is always free, where cypherpunks go to just hide and speak. Hide and speak, we stay in the shadows and make some noise. Hide and speak, digital freedom, yeah, that is our choice. Hide and speak, privacy doesn't mean not having a voice. Hide and speak, what you wanna share is only
T-minus 1 minute.
Look, the world is exposed, yeah, the walls are thin. Everybody posting every place that they've been. Trading privacy for likes, that's a heavy cost. In the ocean of data, the person gets lost. So we flip the switch, yeah, we go underground. Moving through the silence without making a sound. Not hiding because you are doing something wrong. Just defending your rights before they are gone. The room is secure, so let the session start. Speak from the brain or speak from the heart. Tell us your story, we unlock the doors. We invite the guests, and
T-minus
yeah, the
30
floor is
seconds.
yours. You can keep the mask on, keep it low key. Privacy is priceless, but opinions are free. We amplify the voices that they try to call weak. Welcome to the stream, time to hide and speak. Hide and speak, we stay in the shadows and make some noise. Hide and speak, digital freedom, yeah, it's our choice.
10, 9,
Hide and speak, privacy doesn't mean
7,
having a voice.
6, 5,
Hide and speak, what you
3,
wanna share is only your choice.
1.
Hide and speak.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. And thanks again, Stefan, for being here. This has been amazing so far. Some really, really useful information here. And I just want to remind everybody that he is the Program and Communications Director for Restore the Fourth. So he's the one making all the information over there. And there's a whole lot of good information. So make sure you go and check it out. And like I said, if you want to get involved, that's a really, really good place to get started. So definitely make sure you guys check that out. So now we have a super, super important conversation to have is privacy and safety for activists, which is something that's become a major, major issue in recent years. So, Stephen, when people go to a protest or get involved in activism, what is the number one digital mistake that puts them in danger?
God, there's so many to pick from. I would say, just as a starting point, when you're bringing your phone to a protest that has biometric verification enabled on it, whether that is a face scan or a fingerprint. Just fundamental privacy practice, disable Face ID on your phone if you are going to a protest or any sort of political event in which there will be law enforcement and surveillance present, which is maybe almost 100% of the time. Because, given let's say you're arrested and they want to look at your phone, it's very easy for them to scan your face to access it. And while there may not be allowed to do so, there are reported cases of police doing that. And the same thing goes for a thumbprint or any kind of fingerprint. Get rid of it. In truth, if you can, I highly recommend it. Do not bring your phone. Leave your phone either in the car or at home. Or I understand, phones are important tools for a political protest because they record, they take photographic evidence. They're important communication tools in case people, they're in trouble and you need to help someone, right? I highly recommend a burner phone, specifically for protest and political activity only. But I recognize that's not an expense that everyone can make. And so if at the bare minimum, no biometric verification, cannot emphasize that enough. Don't do it. I think you're muted again.
Again, that's a really, really good tip. Thank you for that. It's one that I don't actually see recommended to people a lot. And it is really important. Like you said, they can just hold the phone up to you and they're in. They can't force you to give them your PIN number. That is something that you can keep hidden and there's nothing they can do about that. But there's nothing to stop them from holding the phone up to your face and unlocking it. So That is a really, really good tip, though. Definitely. Thank you for that. And people listen to him. He knows what he's talking about. Why is disabling location services not always enough to stay private?
Well, as we touched on throughout the conversation, ALPRs are going to track the movement of your vehicle, which is associated with your name. So even if your phone is not tracking your location, you're still being tracked via your vehicle. Aside from that, police will often implement what are called stingrays or IMSI catchers. And at a very basic level, these spoof a network to force your phone to connect to it. And once your cell phone has successfully connected to their stingray device, they can track its location. They also can look at metadata on the phone to see who you're communicating with. So even if you were to disable your location services, they can still use those tools to see where you are and where you've moved and where you've ended up and where you came from. So again, that's why I say bare minimum, don't bring the phone. But it's a balancing act. I think you also need to assess your sort of personal risk too when you're going to these protests, right? For example, if you're a student who is on a student visa, you've come from another country to study in the United States, so you're at a really high risk of, especially in the current political context. And so it's really important that those you're protesting with can help support you in ensuring that you're not being surveilled, because you're most likely a target for government agencies who want to surveil you and find you and arrest you and potentially punish you for your political speech. So if a friend or an activist in solidarity has an electronic device with them that is properly privacy protected, and we could talk more about that, what that may look like, you should leave your phone at home and stay with that person who can help protect you, who can ensure that they're communicating on your behalf. We don't ever do activism and protest alone. It's always in solidarity with others, and that is like a thing I just really I always want to drive home, because people can help protect you from this. People can make sure you're safe, especially if you're a high risk person. So just bear that in mind as we talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and it's like you said, there are a lot of good uses for a phone, but like if you're with 10 people, you don't need 10 phones to, generally speaking, so.
Right. And the draw
smart.
is always there because you want to be able to document the evidence of what the protest and what's going on. So the easiest thing would be to just bring your phone, right? So it's kind of a catch-22 at the end of the day.
And see, the other things to think about too is like how all this location data and stuff is used to pinpoint you to a crime or to a location. Well, the reverse is true too. So if you leave your phone at home, you can go in court and be like, well, no, my cell phone is pinged sitting at my house the whole time. Like, if they're going to use the location data against you, you can also use it back to protect yourself too. So if your phone and all your digital equipment is saying he's sitting at home all day long, like that's another little bit of evidence that might help you someday. So there's another side of things too. Like there's going to a protest is one. The other side that is really complicated is organizing protests or actually, working, getting other people to organize together. And how do you do that in the modern landscape? Do that on the internet without like just basically handing over the whole digital map to what you're doing and who's going to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's no really fully protective method for this, but there are ways that you can do this as safely and as privately as possible. The first is you should always be using, regardless of whether or not you're politically organizing, but especially if you are, you should be using encrypted messaging. Signal is what we use, for example, with Restore the Fourth. We do all emailing over Proton Mail. They're pretty decent resources. They're not foolproof, but because there's always the potential for, let's say, an FBI agent to infiltrate your chat that you're using to organize. But there's not much in the way you can do about that besides being vigilant and having a set of digital privacy protocols for your members in the chat where you're saying, do not share communications outside of this isolated chat. Make sure that you're setting messages to auto delete after a certain period of time. You do not want to create a traceable log and history of what you're saying, especially if it's sensitive political organizing material. And then in this conversation, I would leave primarily to both of you. You should always be using a VPN. But I would let you guys handle that more than me. That's your domain.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my opinion you should be using a VPN all the time, not just when you're activated,
Yes.
being an activist or protesting, but
Yep.
and when you encrypt all your connection, especially in the situation you said, the pineapple, they call it, the fake Wi-Fi networks that are so common at these protest situations. If you're on a VPN, then all of that data is going to be encrypted. So yes, they can capture all that data, but it doesn't do them a whole lot of good. They can't actually read what you're doing. So even in those type of situations, and there's literally hundreds of different weird, obscure attacks and ways to access your data as it's going across Wi-Fi, and VPNs block most of them. So it's not that it necessarily blocks them; it's that even if they get your data, it doesn't matter because it's all encrypted, garbled junk, and they can't read it. So that's definitely something you should be doing anytime you're out somewhere like that. It's organizing anything on the internet. It's a tricky thing because the whole point of it is to get the information out there. So how do you get the information out there without getting the information out there? So what it really comes down to is just trying to keep your anonymity, trying to keep your identity hidden so that you can freely get that information out there without jeopardizing yourself or causing any sort of retaliation. And that's where, using a VPN can come really helpful to change your IP address, change your location, make it look like you're on the other side of the world. So it's just a little bit harder to find you. So it's just that's definitely something to keep in mind. This isn't something you want to necessarily go on Facebook and mass blast out to all of your friends or create a new Facebook group for, because that's 100% all coming right back at you. So it's just something to consider. It's not just people are starting to understand that you have to be careful when you go out to a protest, but you still have to be careful when you're planning to go to the protest. Even just talking to your friends and organizing and saying, hey, are you going to go to this thing this weekend? If you're using that, you're not on a VPN, you're using a non-encrypted messaging app, you've created all of the information they need to tie you to that thing later. So, so then when the flock camera sees your car driving down the street, that's only one piece of data, but now they get, well, look at that. They send an email to a friend saying, we're going to go there. Now they're establishing a whole pattern, and the next thing you know, they know exactly what you did. So you can never 100% block out every single bit of everything to everyone. So it's just a matter of trying to keep as many little bits of that data secret as possible so they can't all paint the picture of who you are and what you're doing, essentially. So,
and really it comes down to, individual personal accountability, right? Because it's like, if I don't bring my phone, but then all of my friends bring their phones, and, 9 out of 10 of us are secured, right? But it only takes that one that isn't secured that then pings off our devices, connects to Wi-Fi's, and exposes everyone. So it's really what you have to do is just be aware of what you can control and, how you can limit the visibility on your devices.
Yeah. I mean, now we live in a world too. Like, the other thing you have to consider is there can be just people walking around there with meta glasses on that are recording you the whole time, and you're not even necessarily noticing that. I read this I thought it was really fascinating thread on Reddit the other day where somebody was saying, my best friend that I've been friends with for like 30 years, her work made her get these meta glasses for work, and now she loves them, and now her whole family has them, and they use them all the time. And we, like a year ago, had planned this camping trip, and we're supposed to go, and I have little children, and every time I get with her, they have these glasses on, and I don't feel comfortable with that, and she's like, I talked to her about it, and she got really upset about it and was like very standoffish about it. And like, so there's like actual relationships now that are being broken up just because of the technology that comes along with it. And like, it's something you have to really, really be cautious of what are you subjecting your friends to with your technology too. You really have to try to think about that. You can't necessarily police what they're doing, but you can certainly kind of keep an eye on what you're doing and try to make sure you're doing your best to not only protect yourself but also protect the people around you, especially in situations like this where you're going to go protest or something.
Yeah. I mean, we often talk about individual privacy, but privacy it's a group effort. And if you're in an organization, your organization is only as private and safe as its least secure member.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to have written guidelines that are followed and based on a sense of trust along with one another. I think one of the most radical things you can do is have a strong solidarity with fellow activists based on trust, because the antithesis of trust is exactly what surveillance builds. It's based on this idea that you have to distrust everyone around you, and everyone needs to be watched because you never know what someone is going to do. But you really have to reject that ethos when you're organizing and when you're involved in political activity, because it can lead to the downfall of what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like, divide and conquer. It's a highly effective tactic for a reason, because it works. You know what I mean? And so if we allow ourselves to be divided over the little small stuff, then we can't come together on the really important issues like this. Then we're just going to lose. We're going to lose all of these battles. So, like, that's why, I see people, I've seen situations where like there's a protest, related to privacy or something, and people are like, oh yeah, but those are a bunch of liberals, or those are a bunch of conservatives. And, I think differently. I'm like, but do you think the same way about privacy? Because that's what they're talking about. They're not, you don't have to go vote for their guy if you go there. Like, they're talking about an issue that you think the same thing about. Like, that's what really matters here. That's the thing. Like, and that's what we love about this show is I try to find people from all different walks of life and bring them on here, because they come on and they're saying the same things. They agree with us. They have the same ideas about privacy. And that's what I want people to realize. Like, it doesn't matter how different we are, because most people feel the same way when it comes to privacy. Most people don't want to be watched. Like, this is a natural human feeling. So all of the things that we disagree on don't matter if this is a thing we all do agree on. So, that's what's important here. And, no major change has happened because everybody didn't work together on it. That's never been the story. So, it's important to set aside our differences and like focus on what we do agree on, and understand that together we are infinitely stronger than any of us could ever be on our own.
Yeah. Ultimately, we have the same vision and commitment to the same principle. And so these individual political differences are counterproductive to achieving what is the same idea. And the more people that can really commit themselves to that, the better off we will be in the long run here when it comes to achieving a truly strong, privacy-centric set of laws and policies and ways of living.
Absolutely. So is there anything else that you wanted to bring up about privacy and safety for activists?
I'll just say, like, some very quick fire tips. Since there's going to be facial recognition cameras most likely around you, I would wear a mask. There's a growing sort of interest in ways to thwart facial recognition based on what you're wearing, or like putting on your face, like a face paint. Fortunately, the research is not there yet, and I don't want people to go to a protest thinking that they paint their face in a certain way, it may stop facial recognition. Your best bet is to wear a mask, sunglasses, and maybe a hat if you really want to protect yourself. The second sort of quick fire tip is if you can avoid driving to a protest or political event in your own vehicle, I would say do so. Public transit, walking, getting carpooling with someone who may not be staying at the protest. Any potential ways that you can avoid you taking your own vehicle is
Not
best.
Uber either.
Not Uber. Absolutely not Uber.
Sorry,
Definitely
just had
not.
to bring that up.
Yeah.
No, that's an important distinction. Thank you.
Yeah, no, only if like a close trusted friend or family member can offer you a ride there, and ideally is not staying, is maybe the best way to go about that. But do not use any rideshare company, because I promise you they are retaining the data about your travel, and they are selling it and sharing it. So avoid.
Yeah, this year actually Uber put out like press releases, like they were bragging about this. I don't know, they're so tuned out to what people think that like they actually thought this was something worth like celebrating, is that they launched Uber Intelligence, where now all of the data for all the drivers and all the orders, all the riders, all the people that order food on Uber Eats, we now are able to get all of that data and compile it together and package it and sell it for advertising. And now we're going to be able to give you more targeted ads. And we can even do things like say, hey, we know you usually like tacos on Tuesday night. Should we get an order going to you? And they were bragging about this. They thought people would be like, oh, thanks, Uber. That's so helpful, And absolutely that information is going to be for sale for the U.S. government. That's probably the first account they worked on. Before they contacted any advertising company, they were like, hey, government, guess what we got? You know what I mean? That's the big power play. That's where they make a lot of money. So, yeah, no rideshare services, because and it's honestly even probably worse than your own vehicle at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we got some other interesting stuff to talk about here. Let's see. We blame the government for spying, but often they're just using the data for private companies, like we talked about. Is the biggest threat to our privacy actually the government, or is it the fact that we've let corporations just track our every move for free apps and services?
Well, the key way to think about it is that the distinction between public and private surveillance is so blurred to the point that it can be viewed as a singular entity, really. Because at this point, Amazon, Google, Facebook or / Meta, all of these, the typical Silicon Valley big tech giants, are not just tech companies, they're military contractors. They share data with the government at a price. They contract with the government for various systems and services. Just as we saw recently in the news, OpenAI just signed a contract with DoD/DOW to integrate their LLM systems into classified records, including Section 702 data, by the way. So it's important to look at this as an entity that feeds off of one another to produce what we call broadly the surveillance state. And so that's why it's important in the policies and legislations that we push for, things like the data broker loophole fix. That is a thing that is targeted directly at private data as well as government acquisition of it. Of course, when it comes to the world of private industry and business collecting and harvesting data, the term you all may have heard, surveillance capitalism, this idea by Shoshana Zuboff, right? That their profit model is built on harvesting as much data as possible through targeted advertising and the like to then sell it to the highest bidder. As an individual, it seems like the best thing you can do for that kind of thing is to use encrypted communications, a VPN, and disable as much sharing as possible. That being said, there are a lot of laws on the state level to pay attention to that heavily restrict the use of data for targeted advertising. They protect consumer data. I would say as an individual person, you want to be pushing for your state lawmakers to push comprehensive data privacy legislation. That's going to really help protect you from the worst offenses of private companies who want to take as much information as possible from you to expand their profit margins.
Excellent. That makes a lot of sense. I think we got another one here. Let's see. So we used to know when we were being searched because the police officer would show up and knock on your door and hand you a search warrant, and then you would stand there awkwardly while they ripped your house apart. How do you protect a right that the government has learned to violate in secret?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. So there's actually a law right now before Congress. I think it's in committee. It's called the NDO Fairness Act, and it's important to explain here how the police officer serving you a warrant has shifted so much to what we have now, which is primarily the NSA will issue an electronic communications service provider what they call a national security letter. And that national security letter states and demands of that provider, it states that you have to give us these communications from this person, and you cannot disclose to that person that you shared those communications with us.
Yep.
Hence NDO fairness, the non-disclosure sort of Fairness Act. We need this because people deserve to know when their private communications that are stored by whether it's Google or Facebook or whatever are being shared directly with government agencies for the purpose of surveillance and ultimately prosecution of some kind of potential crime. So that's number one. I think that's like the biggest thing that we got to push for. Part of that language is in the Government Surveillance Reform Act, which is what's going to reform and reauthorize FISA 702. That's why it's important we get that reform passed, because it has a lot of different fixes for the issues we're talking about right now. Aside from that, there is the practice by police officers that is really, it's not known very well, but it's called parallel construction. And it's this idea that a police officer is trying to find a way to justify a search of you, and whether that's primarily through a warrant, by building a chain of evidence that is different from, but parallel to, the original way that they got that evidence. So I'll just illustrate it by a quick example. Law enforcement officer pulls you over for a broken taillight, and they say, I would like to search your vehicle. I have suspicion that you have contraband in here, and I would like to search it. The bar is really low there. They're probably justified in doing that. Vehicular privacy is much weaker in Fourth Amendment law than other domains. They search your car, and let's say they find what they're looking for. They find some kind of drug paraphernalia. You get arrested. In the courts, it looks pretty typical. They pulled you over for a minor traffic violation. They found evidence of a more serious crime. The search is justified after the fact because they had reasonable suspicion. But we have to rewind. Before that traffic stop, they got intelligence from the DEA that you had drug paraphernalia based on an analysis of your location data, your communications content, your phone metadata, and all other sorts of surveillance that they've conducted on you. So the police preemptively already knew that stuff about you and used the traffic violation stop as a sort of way to preempt that. But they don't disclose that in the court, because it's illegal surveillance and they can't do it. They didn't get a warrant to do it. That's that parallel paths of evidence we're talking about, right? That's a major Fourth Amendment issue that we are working on with Restore the Fourth, but it's so unknown. It's so hard to get the information out there that shows people that police are doing this, because police even hide it from judges, that it's a tough issue. But it's important to be aware of it and to be highly skeptical of police evidentiary practices.
Absolutely. No, that's really interesting. I'm going to have to read up on that more. I've heard that term before. I wasn't really sure what that means, but that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that's a super shady way of doing things. But I see how that's useful for them to do. And that's the difficulty. You know, a lot of people want to immediately blame the police for a lot of this stuff, but the problem really is that we have a system that allows that to happen. You know, and in situations like this, where if they're not supposed to do it, but they are able to, if there's a loophole that allows them to do it and still be, you know, not get in trouble for that, that's an issue that needs to be addressed on a legal basis. You know, I mean, the officers, their job is just to solve crime, and like every job, like there's quotas, they got to do their job well or they get fired, and they have a family to feed, so they're going to use every tool at their disposal to solve crimes and to make sure their family gets fed. The problem is if we're giving them tools that can violate our privacy, and we don't have laws to protect us from that, they're going to do it. And you know, it's easy to blame them, but the problem is much larger than that. Like, the individual officers don't have the ability to stop this. Like, if they do it, they're just going to end up fired, and then another officer is going to be in their place that is going to use these tools. So, you know, we need to, like he's saying, we need to address the larger issue, which is the system that is allowing this and allowing our rights to be violated. So
yes, absolutely, it's a structural issue, right?
Sure.
And, you know, if police they're explicitly trained in how to, you know, use things like parallel construction. That training is the product of years and years of intelligence and federal law enforcement agency building an apparatus that makes it as easy to surveil people as possible. So I think you're spot on. It's like, you can't blame the individual officer so much as the system in which they've been ingratiated into, and the system in which they are compelled to do exactly what we're trying to stop.
Absolutely. Well, I said we got a few questions here. What are your thoughts on signal backups? The app occasionally asks me if I want to back it up.
Signal backups. Honestly, I'm not too familiar with signal backups. It's a fairly new feature, I think. I would say my recommendations are, I guess, twofold. One, if you're going to back up your signal information, it has to be local storage, encrypted. Do not upload that backup to the cloud. Be very, very careful with that. Secondly, I'm not sure to the extent to which it backs up messages that are set to, for example, be automatically deleted or are temporary. And like we've been kind of talking about before, I'm really skeptical of saving and preserving a permanent record of other people's messages that are sent to you that they may not want saved on permanent record. So what I recommend you do is reach out to the Signal Foundation. They have a point of contact that addresses these kinds of concerns. They're a nonprofit, and they can help explain better than I can the technical details of exactly how that backup works. But if you really need to preserve a chat, you want to use backup so that in the case that something happens where your signal gets deleted by accident, you get a new device, something like that. Encrypted, external storage, local storage, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Let's see. We got here. What are some privacy-related bills at the national level that I should be following?
So, like I said a little bit before, the Government Surveillance Reform Act that has been introduced by Senator Ron Wyden, that is a phenomenal reform package that deals with a lot of federal intelligence programs and surveillance authorities. Secondly, would be the Protect Liberty and End Warrantless Surveillance Act, which was introduced by Representative Jim Jordan in the House. Similar 702 reform bill, really strong, really privacy protective. The NDO Fairness Act for dealing with disclosures of surveillance to individuals that have been affected. That's really important. And then another bill out of Senator Wyden's office, the Government Surveillance Transparency Act, which is more so about ensuring that members of the public are informed about how the government is conducting surveillance and what they can do about it. Just in general, if there is one lawmaker that you should follow in this space, that you should see what they're doing, it is Senator Ron Wyden.
Ron Wyden, absolutely.
That is our guy. He is so well versed on this. He is an amazing advocate in government, and I pray and hope that he stays in office for as long as possible. That is the original author of Section 230, one of the fundamental backbones of the modern day internet. That guy is a lot of respect for Ron Wyden. So
yeah, when I worked for private internet access all the way back in like 2015, we were working hand in hand with him on various issues. Like, he's always been a huge supporter of the privacy scene. So for sure. What is the minimum amount of money it takes in lobbying dollars to influence the direction of a particular issue?
Well, Restore the Fourth is almost entirely member funded. We are funded by donations that are fairly small in number, and it's a pretty small amount of money to do it. However, we have a lot of volunteer lobbyists that do it for no dollars. So I think my straightforward answer to this question is zero, because I think it's less about money and more about the number of people you have pushing an issue forward, pushing a piece of legislation forward. And it's also about your strategy. What members are you talking to? How are you framing these issues depending on their political party or an affiliation, what they really care about? What methods of contact are you using? Are you doing phone calls? Are you doing emails? Are you doing letters? Are you going to their office locations and trying to get an in-person meeting to discuss these things? I mean, I think that realistically you can do this without money. It certainly helps because you can pay people like me to do it professionally. But even then, I make chump change compared to, a Meta Google lobbyist. And that's fine, because I don't want to be those people. I want to be doing the right thing. So short answer, $0. Longer answer, money helps, but you can do it. You can do it without it. And it's okay. You can
the
really make a
squeaky
change.
wheel gets the grease.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you make you can make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the guy who asked that question is actually the one who was able to get Bend, Oregon. I think I said it right finally. Bend, Oregon, to get rid of flock safety. So, I mean, he's absolutely somebody who knows that you can't get those wheels turning. So, he's pushing further too, trying to get some more stuff done. He's been working at the state level in Oregon too, which is awesome. So we have a little series that we do here called Hero of the Week. So we're going to run that right now, and we'll be back in just a minute.
We look for the champions leading the way. Go fight for your internet rights every day. It's freedom and justice that we truly seek. We salute the hide and speak hero of the week.
This week's Hide and Speak Hero of the Week is a group that has spent more than 35 years fighting for our freedom online. We're highlighting the Electronic Frontier Foundation, also known as EFF. EFF works to protect our digital rights. That means they stand up for our privacy, our right to speak freely, and our right to use strong tools to keep our data safe. When someone tries to weaken encryption, track people without cause, or silence voices on the internet, EFF is there to push back. What makes them so special is they don't just talk about these issues, they take action. They fight in court. They challenge bad laws. They call out companies that collect too much data.
and they help people understand how to stay safe and private online. Thanks to EFF, many harmful surveillance programs have been exposed or stopped. They've helped protect journalists, activists, and everyday people who just want to use the internet without being watched. They remind us that our rights don't end when we go online. We still deserve privacy, and we still deserve freedom. For their enduring fight to keep the internet open, safe, and free for everyone, we're proud to name the Electronic Frontier Foundation as this week's Hide and Speak Hero of the Week.
Hide and Speak Hero of the Week.
Excellent. Yeah, EFF is absolutely amazing. That was another one, PIA. We were working with them back in 2015. They've been every battle. They're usually the first ones in there. You know, I'm obsessively watching privacy news, like on a daily basis, everything I could possibly find. And regularly, I'll get an email from them, and I'm like, what? I didn't hear about that. Like, you know, they're so tapped into everything that's going on. And usually, you know, a week before it's even a news story, they already got a campaign going to fight against something. So absolutely, definitely heroes over there. Mm-hmm. Stephen, I want to thank you so much for being here. This has been absolutely amazing. Do you have any last thoughts or upcoming campaigns or anything you want to draw attention to?
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time. You know, with the FISA reform battle coming up, April 20th is our deadline for this. I would recommend anyone that's watching, sign up for Restore the Fourth's mailing list, which you can do right at our website link. We'll send updates on what's happening. We'll send out petitions and actions that you can take to make sure you're influencing this fight in the right direction. And then, you know, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me whenever. I can share my email in the chat, or put it in the description, whatever works best for you guys. And if you're particularly interested in this and you really want to be involved, I really encourage you to sign up to volunteer with Restore the Fourth. restorethefourth.com/volunteer, or get involved. It's on the Get Involved section of our website. It's, you know, we don't demand anything of you other than the time you can give. And we are always looking for privacy conscious folks who really care about this stuff to come help us out and share your ideas and give us your feedback and participate in meetings with Congress members and staff, and just, you know, get involved in a really, really good, solid group of people who genuinely care about this stuff so much. My favorite part of my job is working with volunteers. So I encourage you to join.
And you can make a difference as an individual.
Absolutely.
So have your voice.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being here with us this week. This was it's been a lot of fun. We're Susie and Shane, we're praying for you that everything gets a little better for you over there. But thanks again, everybody, for being here. And I think we
build a safe place where the speech is always free, where cypherpunks go to just hide and speak. Hide and speak. We stay in the shadows and make some noise. Hide and speak. Digital freedom, yeah, that is our choice. Hide and speak. Privacy doesn't mean not having a voice. Hide and speak. What you want to share is only your choice. Hide and speak.
The early internet was the wild, wild west. Strange. Free. We explored, we broke things. And yes, we failed. No rules. And that was beautiful. But times have changed. We hesitate. We censor ourselves because we know they're watching. Surveillance kills curiosity, turning the internet from a frontier of hope into a cage of silence. And your VPN? It's based on trust. For let's be real, nobody has ever lied to me, said nobody ever. Yet true privacy is still within reach. vp.net doesn't rely on trust, it runs on real-time proof. Because privacy is about becoming your truest self when no one's watching. So you can be the best you when they are. Otherwise be an NPC, a digital product, and lose. vp.net, don't trust, verify.